Notice that the moment you stop chasing someone's attention, something changes. Not because you've become colder, not because you've started playing games, but because, for the first time in a long time, you've stopped asking another person to decide whether you're enough. If you've ever felt that quiet ache, wondering why you keep giving so much while receiving so little, stay with me. And if conversations like this help you see yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing, not because I want another number, but because sometimes the right words arrive exactly when someone is finally ready to hear them. I want to tell you something that many men spend years misunderstanding. High-value women are rarely looking for a man who can impress them every single day. They're paying attention to something much quieter. They're watching how a man treats himself. Most people think attraction begins with confidence. I don't think that's true. I think attraction often begins with self-respect. Because confidence can be performed, self-respect can't. I've sat across from men who were successful, funny, intelligent, physically attractive, and somehow they still carried the same question behind every sentence. Do you like me? They never actually said those words, but everything else did. The extra texts, the immediate replies, the nervous laughter after every joke, the habit of changing opinions just to avoid disagreement, the constant need to prove they were different from every other man. It's exhausting to watch. Not because these men were weak, because they genuinely believed love had to be earned by making themselves smaller. Maybe you've done this too. Maybe you've convinced yourself that being endlessly available makes you dependable, that agreeing with everything makes you easy to love, that sacrificing your own needs proves you're serious. It sounds kind. It feels generous, but underneath it is often fear. Fear that if you disappoint someone, they'll leave. Fear that if you say no, they'll find someone better. Fear that your value depends on how useful you are. Here's what most men never realize. A relationship becomes emotionally unstable long before anyone argues. It becomes unstable the moment one person quietly abandons themselves to keep the other comfortable. That's the beginning, not the end. And here's the strange part. The more you ignore your own boundaries, the less emotionally safe you actually appear. Not because you're too caring, because your care no longer feels like a choice, it feels like desperation. There's a difference, a huge one. Imagine meeting someone who agrees with every opinion you have, never says no, never expresses a different preference, never asks for anything. At first it might feel pleasant, but eventually, something inside you starts asking uncomfortable questions. Who is this person? Really? What happens when they finally get tired? Are they being honest, or just trying to keep me? Human beings trust consistency, but they also trust authenticity. Without authenticity, consistency starts feeling artificial. This is why the first boundary we're going to explore isn't about creating distance. It isn't about pretending not to care. It isn't about becoming emotionally unavailable. It's about refusing to negotiate your identity just to avoid rejection. That sounds simple. In reality, it's one of the hardest things a man can ever learn. Because saying yes to yourself sometimes means hearing someone else say no. And that's where most people panic. They mistake rejection for proof that something is wrong with them. But psychologically, rejection often reveals compatibility, not worth. Two good people can simply want different lives. Two emotionally healthy people can discover they're not the right match. That's not failure, that's clarity. The men who quietly attract emotionally mature women usually understand something that doesn't look impressive from the outside. They don't see every connection as their last chance. They see it as one possibility among many. That single shift changes everything. Because when you stop treating every woman as if she holds the final vote on your value, you begin showing up differently. You listen instead of performing. You speak instead of rehearsing. You stay curious instead of anxious. And for the first time, the person she's meeting isn't the version of you that's begging to be chosen. It's the version that's already chosen himself. That's where real attraction begins. Not with perfection, with a boundary that says, quietly but unmistakably, I won't lose myself, even for someone I deeply hope stays. That first boundary changes something inside you long before anyone else notices. You wake up one morning and realize you're no longer checking your phone every few minutes, hoping one message will determine what kind of day you're going to have. That doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped handing someone else the keys to your emotional state. And believe me, women notice that difference. Not because they're testing you, because emotional steadiness is surprisingly rare. I remember a man who once described the beginning of every relationship the same way. He said, "Everything feels amazing until I start caring." At first, that sounded strange, but when he explained it, I understood. The moment he developed feelings, he also developed fear. If she took longer to reply, he imagined she'd lost interest. If she cancelled once, he assumed another man had replaced him. If she sounded tired, he searched for hidden meanings in every sentence. Nothing had actually happened, yet inside his mind, the relationship was already falling apart. Have you ever caught yourself doing something similar? Not because you're insecure all the time, but because you've invested so much emotional energy into one person that every tiny change feels enormous. That's what happens when your inner world becomes dependent on someone else's behavior. And this leads us to the second boundary. Protect your emotional pace. Most men think attraction grows by giving more, faster, more attention, more time, more emotional investment, more future plans. But healthy attraction doesn't usually work that way. Think about the strongest friendships you've ever had. They weren't built in 3 days. Trust appeared gradually. Consistency mattered more than intensity. Relationships deserve that same patience. Yet when romance enters the picture, many men suddenly sprint toward emotional closeness before trust has had time to catch up. They begin imagining a future with someone they're still getting to know. They fill in the blanks with hope instead of reality. The mind is incredibly creative when it wants certainty. If it doesn't have enough information, it invents stories, sometimes beautiful ones, sometimes terrifying ones. Neither is fair to the other person. One of the healthiest men I ever met had a habit that seemed almost boring. When he liked someone, he didn't rush. He didn't disappear to seem mysterious. He didn't overwhelm her with constant attention either. He simply allowed reality to reveal itself. If she was kind, he noticed. If she handled conflict with maturity, he noticed. If her actions consistently matched her words, he noticed. And if they didn't, he noticed that too. He wasn't trying to convince anyone to become the right person. He was quietly observing whether they already were. That's emotional maturity. Not suspicion, not cynicism, just patience. Because here's a difficult truth. Infatuation often asks, how quickly can we become everything to each other? Emotional wisdom asks, who are we when the excitement settles? Those are two completely different questions. High-value women often appreciate men who move at a healthy emotional pace because it feels safe. Not emotionally distant, safe. There's no pressure to rush feelings, no expectation to perform perfection, no constant need to reassure someone whose anxiety has become the center of the relationship. Instead, there's space. Space for curiosity, space for honesty, space for both people to discover each other without pretending. Ironically, that calmness creates more intimacy than urgency ever could. Because when someone isn't trying to force closeness, closeness has room to grow naturally. So ask yourself something tonight. When you think about the woman you want, do you actually know her? Or do you mostly know the future you've imagined with her? There's an important difference. One is built on reality, the other is built on hope. Hope is beautiful, but hope alone can't carry a relationship. Only truth can. And protecting your emotional pace means refusing to confuse possibility with certainty. It means allowing affection to deepen one honest moment at a time. Not because you're afraid of love, but because you respect it too much to rush what deserves time. The strongest connections rarely begin with fireworks that burn the brightest. More often, they begin with something quieter. Two people who refuse to race ahead, because they understand that what lasts is almost never built in a hurry. The third boundary is one that many men don't even realize they've crossed. It happens so quietly that it almost feels normal. You stop making plans with friends because she might be free. You postpone hobbies that used to make you feel alive. You cancel a workout because she'd rather spend the evening together. Little by little, your life begins shrinking around one person. At first, it feels romantic. It feels like commitment. It feels like you're showing her she's your priority. But then something subtle starts happening. The man she was initially curious about begins disappearing. Not because she changed him, because he slowly stopped being himself. I've seen this pattern more times than I can count. A man enters a relationship with a full, meaningful life. He has routines, goals, people who know him outside of romance. He laughs easily. He has stories to tell because he's actually living them. Then love arrives, and without realizing it, he quietly trades his world for hers. Months later, he can't understand why the relationship feels different. He thinks he needs to try harder, become more attentive, give even more. But that's rarely the answer, because attraction doesn't survive when one person's identity slowly fades away. Think about the people you've admired most throughout your life. Was it because they revolved around someone else's world? Or because they had a life that felt deeply rooted in who they were? There's something deeply reassuring about a person who doesn't disappear when they fall in love. They still care, they still show up, but they don't abandon the parts of themselves that made them interesting in the first place. That's the third boundary. Never sacrifice your entire life to keep a relationship alive. A healthy relationship should become part of your life. It should never become your entire identity. There's a psychological reason this matters. When your happiness depends on only one person, every disagreement feels catastrophic. Every misunderstanding feels like a threat to your entire emotional world. That's an unbearable amount of pressure for both people. She doesn't just become your partner, she becomes your only source of comfort, your only excitement, your only emotional home. No one can carry that forever. Not because they don't love you, because they're human. The healthiest relationships I've witnessed always had something beautiful in common. Both people kept growing individually. They supported each other's dreams instead of replacing them. One would spend a weekend pursuing a personal goal. The other genuinely celebrated it. There wasn't fear. There wasn't guilt. There was trust. Trust says something very different from fear. Fear says, "Stay close so I won't lose you." Trust says, "Go live your life. I'll still be here when you come back." Can you feel the difference? One relationship is held together by anxiety. The other is held together by freedom. And freedom is surprisingly attractive, not because it creates distance, because it removes unnecessary pressure. A woman who values emotional maturity often isn't looking for a man who can entertain her every waking moment. She's looking for someone who already knows how to build a meaningful life, someone who doesn't expect her to rescue him from boredom, or loneliness, or a lack of purpose. Because purpose can't be borrowed, it has to be built. Maybe that's uncomfortable to hear. Maybe you've been waiting for the right relationship to finally make life feel complete. If so, you're not alone. Many people quietly believe that love will fix the emptiness they've been carrying. But love doesn't erase an empty life. It shines a light on it, and that realization can feel painful. Yet it's also incredibly freeing. Because once you stop expecting a relationship to become your entire reason for waking up, you begin creating a life that's worth inviting someone into. Instead of asking someone to become your reason for living, you offer them a place beside you as you continue living with intention. That's a completely different kind of love. It's calmer, it's stronger, and strangely enough, it's also far more attractive. Because a high-value woman isn't searching for a man who needs her to complete him. She's hoping to meet a man whose life already has direction, so the relationship becomes a shared journey, not a rescue mission. The fourth boundary is the one that makes many people uncomfortable. Not because it's cruel, because it requires courage. It's the boundary of walking away when your values are repeatedly ignored. Read that again in your mind. Not when someone makes one mistake, not after one difficult conversation, not because the relationship isn't perfect, but when the same pattern keeps repeating, and every honest conversation leads back to the exact same place. Many men don't leave relationships because they stop loving. They leave far too late. After they've explained themselves 10 different ways, after they've lowered their standards one compromise at a time, after they've convinced themselves that if they're patient enough, understanding enough, forgiving enough, eventually things will change. Sometimes they do, but often they don't. And here's the painful part. The longer you stay in a situation that consistently hurts your sense of self, the more you begin questioning your own reality. You stop asking, is this relationship healthy? You start asking, maybe I'm expecting too much. That's a dangerous shift, because healthy standards begin to feel like unreasonable demands. I've spoken with men who apologized for wanting simple things: honesty, respect, reliability, kindness during conflict, as if those were impossible expectations. Somewhere along the way, they had been taught that asking for basic emotional respect made them difficult. It doesn't. Every lasting relationship has moments of disappointment. Every couple misunderstands each other. Every person gets things wrong. The difference isn't whether problems exist. The difference is what happens after they're acknowledged. Does the other person take responsibility? Do they make a sincere effort to understand your perspective? Do their actions slowly begin matching their promises? Or do you keep having the same conversation with different words? There's an old emotional trap that many people fall into. They confuse history with hope. I've invested so much. We've been together for years. We've shared too much to let this go. Those thoughts are understandable, but time alone doesn't make something healthy. If it did, every long relationship would be a happy one. We both know that's not true. The real question isn't how long you've stayed, it's who you've become while staying. Have you become calmer, more confident, more emotionally secure? Or have you become someone who constantly second-guesses himself? Someone who rehearses conversations before speaking because he's afraid of another argument? Someone who hides disappointment just to keep the peace? If that's happening consistently, something important deserves your attention, because peace built on silence isn't peace. It's emotional exhaustion wearing a polite smile. One of the strongest men I ever met said something that stayed with me. He told me, "I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of admitting I'd stayed somewhere that no longer reflected who I was." That sentence carried years of quiet pain, not because he had failed, because he finally chose honesty over comfort. That's what this boundary is really about. It's not threatening to leave. It's not giving ultimatums. It's not using distance to gain control. It's quietly recognizing that love without mutual respect slowly erodes both people. And when respect begins disappearing, no amount of chemistry can replace it. A high-value woman doesn't expect you to accept behavior that repeatedly violates your values. In fact, emotionally mature women often feel safer with men who can calmly say, "This matters to me." Not loudly, not angrily, not to win, simply because it's true. There's something deeply grounding about a man who knows where his lines are. He doesn't move them every time he's afraid of losing someone. He doesn't erase them just because attraction is strong. He understands that boundaries aren't walls built to keep people out. They're foundations built to keep relationships healthy. And when someone repeatedly asks you to abandon those foundations, walking away isn't an act of pride. Sometimes, it's the most honest act of self-respect you'll ever make. The fifth boundary is quieter than all the others. No dramatic speeches, no impossible rules, no emotional games. In fact, most people won't even notice it, but emotionally mature women almost always do. It's the boundary of refusing to chase clarity that someone is unwilling to give. I want you to think about how much emotional energy people spend trying to decode mixed signals. They reread messages, analyze pauses, replay conversations from 3 days ago, ask friends, "What do you think she meant?" They're searching for certainty where honesty should already exist. And the strange thing is, deep down, they often already know the answer. They just don't like it. Because uncertainty keeps hope alive. Hope whispers, maybe she's just busy, maybe she's confused, maybe next week will be different. Sometimes that's true. Life gets complicated. People go through difficult seasons. But there's an important difference between someone who is temporarily overwhelmed and someone who repeatedly leaves you guessing where you stand. Healthy interest doesn't require constant detective work. It doesn't mean every text arrives instantly. It doesn't mean there are never misunderstandings. It means that over time, the overall pattern becomes clear. You don't have to convince yourself that you're valued. You feel it through consistent actions. I've watched men spend months chasing explanations, instead of paying attention to behavior. One woman cancelled plans 5 times. Each time she had a reason. Each reason sounded believable. He kept saying, "I just need to be more patient." Maybe, but after the 6th cancellation, the real question wasn't whether her reasons were valid. The real question was why he kept ignoring the message her actions were already sending. Sometimes people aren't trying to hurt you. Sometimes they're simply showing you the level of investment they're capable of giving. The painful part is that we often argue with reality because reality doesn't match the future we imagined. That's why this boundary matters so much. Believe consistent behavior more than comforting words. Words create possibility. Behavior reveals priority. That doesn't make people good or bad, it simply makes things clearer. And clarity, even when it stings, is kinder than endless confusion. There's another side to this that many men overlook. Some become so afraid of rejection that they keep asking for reassurance. Are we okay? Do you still like me? Did I do something wrong? Once in a while, those questions are completely natural. We're all human. But when reassurance becomes a daily requirement, the relationship slowly shifts. Instead of sharing life together, one person begins carrying the responsibility of calming the other's fears. That's an exhausting role. No amount of love can permanently quiet insecurities that haven't been faced from within. Real emotional security grows differently. It grows when you accept that you cannot control another person's feelings. You can communicate honestly, you can show kindness, you can be dependable, but you cannot force someone to choose you. And strangely enough, accepting that truth makes you more peaceful. Because you stop trying to manage every outcome. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's level of interest. You stop treating every delayed reply like a verdict on your value. You begin looking at relationships with open eyes instead of anxious hope. That changes everything. It changes the way you speak, the way you listen, even the way you leave when something isn't right. You don't beg for explanations that never come. You don't chase people who keep walking away. You don't punish them either. You simply accept what their actions have already made clear. The 6th and final boundary is the one that quietly holds all the others together. It's the boundary of protecting your peace. Not your image, not your pride, your peace. There's a difference. Pride says, "I'll never let anyone see me hurt." Peace says, "I'm willing to feel hurt, but I won't build a life around it." Those two things often look similar from the outside. Inside, they're worlds apart. I've met men who looked incredibly confident. They spoke with certainty. They seemed completely unaffected by rejection. But when we talked long enough, another story appeared. They weren't peaceful. They were simply hiding. They had built walls so high that no one could disappoint them anymore. Unfortunately, no one could truly know them either. That's not a boundary, that's isolation. Healthy boundaries don't disconnect you from people. They help you stay connected without losing yourself. And that's what emotionally mature love has always been about. Not finding someone who never challenges you. Not finding someone who agrees with every opinion you have. Not finding someone who magically removes every insecurity you've ever carried. It's finding someone with whom you can remain yourself. Someone who doesn't ask you to become smaller in order to be loved. Someone who appreciates your kindness without expecting endless sacrifice. Someone who respects your honesty even when it's uncomfortable. But here's the part I hope you remember after this video ends. Those people become much easier to recognize once you've stopped abandoning yourself. Because when your standards are clear, your choices become clearer too. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You stop mistaking attention for commitment. You stop believing that emotional intensity automatically means emotional health. Instead, you begin asking quieter questions. Do I feel respected here? Can I speak honestly without fear? Do I leave our conversations feeling calmer or constantly uncertain? Am I becoming more like myself or less? Those questions rarely create dramatic moments, but over time, they completely change the direction of your life. Imagine yourself a year from now. You're sitting across from someone you genuinely care about. There's laughter, there's silence. Neither feels awkward. You don't feel the need to impress her every minute. She doesn't feel the need to test your commitment every day. Both of you can disagree without wondering whether the relationship is about to end. Both of you can spend time apart without inventing stories. Both of you can say, "I need some space today," and no, it won't be taken as rejection. That's not boring, that's emotional security. And emotional security is one of the most attractive qualities two people can share, because it allows love to breathe. Maybe you've never experienced that before. Maybe every relationship you've known has been built on uncertainty, overthinking, or emotional highs followed by painful lows. If that's true, I want to leave you with one gentle reminder. Your past explains your fears. It doesn't have to decide your future. Every healthy boundary we've talked about today begins with one simple decision: to believe that your worth isn't something another person gets to approve or deny. When you truly accept that, you stop chasing people who are unsure about you. You stop apologizing for having healthy standards. You stop shrinking yourself just to make someone else stay. And something unexpected happens. The relationships that remain become lighter, more honest, more peaceful. Not because you've become perfect, but because you finally stop negotiating the parts of yourself that deserve protection. If the right woman enters your life after that, she'll meet a man who isn't asking to be rescued. She'll meet someone who's already building a meaningful life and who's willing to share it, not surrender it. That's the quiet power of boundaries. They aren't designed to push love away. They're designed to make room for the kind of love that doesn't require you to lose yourself to keep it. And if there's one thought I hope stays with you tonight, let it be this. The strongest relationships are not built by the people who hold on the tightest. They're built by two people who know exactly who they are and never ask each other to become someone else just to be loved.